How's everybody doing today? I am Jim, and today we're looking at the Speedway 5, which is from Mini Motors. It's in their Speedway line by the name, which is kind of like a little bit their more budget-oriented line as opposed to the Dualtron line. There's some differences between that we'll talk about briefly, but for right now I'm sitting in front of my cantaloupes here and out in my backyard where it's nice and safe. We're going to go through some of the specs, some of the details of it, and then we're going to get out and ride. So the first thing I like to cover on these is the battery. So I'm not sure if you can see the badging down in here, but this is a 60-volt battery, and there's a very small disagreement on the amp hours. And so on the battery right there it says 23.6, and on some of the other literature it says 23.4. Either way, you're a little bit over 1400 amp hours, or watt hours, excuse me, of battery capacity. So you got a lot of battery, and I'll talk about the range that translates to when my range testing when we're out riding. Now the next thing we jump into is this is a dual motor scooter. So you got dual 1800 watt peak output motors for a total of 3600 watts. Dualtron and Mini Motors, Dualtron and the Speedway, excuse me, don't really do that nominal rating, which I think is it's a more true output. And so the output of the controller is somewhere between 25 to 30 amps. So next thing I'd like to go through is the display. It's the i3 display, black and white display. It's on a lot of the Dualtron Speedway products. Trigger throttle, a little bit of a long reach in some ways, which I know is a real nitpicky thing, but just something to be aware of. A lot of functionality in here. I like to keep my displays slightly loose so that I can rotate them for better visibility in the sun. But you have all the normal stuff. You got wheel settings, you got power settings, you have some braking and acceleration settings. And when I'll talk about what mode I tested everything in while we're riding, just so you get an idea, if you could tune it higher or lower. Then on the other side of the scooter, you got light horn, turn signal with your basically 4 mode options: eco or turbo, single or dual motors. Of course, this is a folding scooter. I have tightened up these handlebars so there's not really any movement in them, but you pull this, a little bit hard to do one-handed because I really tightened them up, and you drop them down and you can fold it up, which is of course handy. Even though this shares some style with some other scooters, it's beefed up in some ways. And so, like, you got a little minder here for the cables, kind of beefier hardware on some of them. Like, this is all metal piece here, like a multi-point suspension in the front. Everything is solid. And the warranty on the scooter is 6 months on everything, and then 1 year on the battery. And Mini Motors has been really great on responding to questions and anything I've had. Now, I am a dealer for Mini Motors now, and that's part of the reason, because they were so good to work with. Got some banging in the distance, that's distracting. So the components on the scooter, beyond the motor and the battery, you got Jack's mechanical disc brakes with 140 millimeter rotors. They do a good job stopping everything. Got air spring suspension, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear, 2 in back, 2 in front. That same mechanical disc brake, 10-inch by 2.7 tubeless tires, and one of the big standout features of Mini Motors products is that the rims separate. So if you get a flat, you don't have to try to pry the tube off the rim. The rim separates from the motor, so it's a lot easier tire change than it would be with a lot of other manufacturers. I'm going to talk about a couple of the specifications right now, kind of specs, dimensions. All those will be down in the description with timestamps if you want to jump around the video or whatever. One of the big ones when you look at this scooter is the size of the deck. So the deck is 21 inches long by 10 inches wide. Some of that usable width you lose because of this little bit of an angle here. You got your grip tape, of course, folding mechanism in here. component wise, you got the headlight that works with the switch on the dashboard, and then you have under deck lighting that works a button over here. I'll move over to that side and show that. The handlebar is adjustable. Right now it's at its highest point, and so all the way down the handlebar is 28 inches off the deck, and it raises up to 38 inches off the deck, and they're 23.5 inches wide. Now that's a little lower than some scooters, that height of the handlebar. I've just noticed that on some scooters lately, the handlebar is a little lower. It kind of helps with stability in some ways. And the one thing you'll notice here, I'm going to grab the front brake, and like, there's not really any movement in that mechanism. It's really solid. I will show how this folds here in a second. But on this side you have dual charging ports, so you can run 2 of the stock chargers, which are a little low output. They're only a 1.75 amp output charger, so that makes a really long charging time if you've really depleted this battery. There's also a fast charger option, or you can use 2 chargers at once. Right behind this button, right behind these charging ports, is the button for the lighting, and it looks like it timed itself off. So you have lights in the front and the rear. You have a projection light that I'll put in a little video right now showing how this how you see this at night. And what's interesting, the projection lighting projects Speedway down here. It looks really cool, but it doesn't really enhance the side visibility as much as like a LED strip would. You got brake light functionality, but in an interesting little light up pattern that's kind of nice. And again, I'll put in night footage showing that as well. I should beep the horn when I was up here. And then the turn signals. You can see here we're in the bright sun. It's not very visible. The turn signals are like kind of a nice idea, but I think if you're really, I've noticed cars when I'm riding they don't act like they've noticed that I had the turn signal on. Of course that turn signal is not visible from the front. Just wrapping up any specs I forgot. It's really hot out here today. It's like in the morning. It's like 10 a.m. and it's already close to 100 degrees. Just a real hot day. So the weight of the scooter, they have it advertised as 70 pounds. I measured it at 65.8 pounds. So it's nice to actually see something coming in lower. That being said, it's foldable. You can lift it and throw it in your car. I would not call it portable. Like, this thing is a beast if you try to carry it. It's just awkward and large to try to carry. The maximum weight rating for this is rated at 265 pound rider. I find that really conservative based on just the amount of power it has, and some of the other scooters that have this same basic frame style, what their rating is. I don't know if I said what the price was. The Speedway 5 is $2,100, so it's definitely not a budget option. But you're going to see when we go, the performance you're getting in this scooter is really it's way up there. I mean, it's fast, and like range is what I really talk about the most. And just a note, you're not going to see me pushing the top speed on this. I really don't like to ride much over 20 miles per hour because I don't want to gear up with full protective gear. And I really think if you're doing that, if you're really tapping in to the speed of this, you really want to be gearing up almost like you're riding a motorcycle. And bearing in mind that electric scooters are really only legal up to 15 miles per hour. I know that's a buzzkill, isn't it? All right, I'm gonna just show how this folds real quick, and then I'm gonna throw on my helmet and we're gonna go ride. I'm gonna go through different modes, talk about my performance testing, and we'll wrap it up. All right, pretty simple folding. Kickstand obviously has to go. You might not see this from that camera angle, but I'm folding down the handlebars. Then collapsing the stem. You have to collapse the stem to the point that and I'll show it with it open. But this is a pretty beefy mechanism, so it takes some force. So pushing forward on the stem, oh boy, almost fell over. Forward on the stem, that collapses. And so you can see here, that's not clicked in, so you have to have the handlebar in at least to that point where it clears the fender and it snaps in. And you know, the balance point is about right there. It's heavy, but you'll see the dimensions down below for how long, you know, it's somewhat compact. For the performance and size and weight and everything, it's pretty compact, really. All right, so Mini Motors advertises that this will climb a 37% slope. This is about a 14% grade. So I have no problem. I mean, most of the scooters will make it up this at different speeds. So I'll put on the screen how this compares to other scooters. 3, 2, 1. Well, that was kind of ridiculous. Yeah. I was just gaining speed up there, up the hill. All right, so a little go through on some of the settings I'm using in here. I have it set on 2 in the speed start mode, so you could set it for a slower starting or a little bit faster start. I do have the power at 100%. So I'm going to toggle through the different speed limitation modes and power modes, just so you can get a feel. So like I said, we're in eco mode, single motor. You can see it's quite slow in eco mode, single motor, speed limit 1, about 6 miles an hour. So in 2, we get a bit more of a bump, and we're up to about 14. So this is eco single motor. I'm only going to go up about 20, but you can see you actually get beyond 20 pretty easily. And like I said, I'm not going to really go above 20 with this, just because that's kind of my practice going forward. So here I am in turbo mode, single motor. Speed limit 1 is about 14. Then 2, it jumps, so we're easily getting up to 20 in speed limit 2, single motor mode, turbo. And I actually really like the way in this mode the power is delivered. It's really smooth. The one thing, I don't know if you can really tell, the handling of this scooter is heavy. The front motor and everything up on the front, and there's a little bit of a trail to the front steering. There's a slight angle, so it makes for a very slow steering scooter. And especially in single motor mode, like the front wheel seems to like resist turning. I don't think I could turn around very easily in this path. But here, I'm gonna speed up. So this is about as fast as I'm going to go right now during this review. Like if you want to see, there's other channels that are going to push the top speed. I am not going to do that. So now we're going to drop back to eco mode and dual motor mode and speed limit 1. So eco mode, dual motor mode, the limits are similar. It actually feels slightly slower. It's like 5 or 6 miles an hour. And to me, this would be kind of miserable. So even now in speed limit 2, you're already starting to feel that acceleration, but you're still topping out about 14. And I have found this speedometer to be very accurate. And so in dual motor mode, eco mode, in speed limit 3, you can get well over 20 miles an hour. So the power is still pretty strong here, even in eco mode with dual motor. I think I might tend to maybe try to use one of the slow start options to see if that kind of tames it down a little bit. But here I'm going to jump into turbo mode, dual motor. We're going to go back down to speed limit 1. So this hangs out about 14. So there's kind of like a stepwise drop between the brake points on these. So 2, you can see right there, it's very quickly and easily getting over 20 miles an hour. And if you get into speed limit 3, it's because it's a speed limit, your power right there is the same, it just limits higher. So I'm probably not going to go any further there with like pushing the speed, and I'm actually going to do most of this rest of this video in eco mode, dual motor mode, which I find a kind of a comfortable mode. And one thing that also is when you start riding this in dual motor mode, the front end behaves a little better, like it handles a little bit better, and it just makes for a little more enjoyable experience. So I'm going to discuss my range testing. I did 3 range tests, and the first range test I did kind of running through all the different modes, and I switched off with a guy who's about the same weight as me, and you know, we did some not quite a worst case scenario, but close. And then my result was around a little under 34 miles. And so that was, I thought that was pretty good for as much, you know, there's some hills, there's some different things we did during that. Now, of course, that's significantly less than the 75 miles, I think it was, of range that Mini Motors has on their website. I don't see really how you would get that range unless you were going very slow. My second and third range tests were really the same route. I just did them in the polar opposites of the modes. I did one in single motor mode, eco mode, and the other in dual motor, turbo mode. Both of those, when I got up to cruising speed, I tried to hold it at about 22 miles an hour. So I'm gonna get up to about there. That's where I was holding it. And I don't know if I ever said this, but this speedometer is quite accurate. So I did a 10-mile ride, and then I recharged and saw what the power usage was. And amazingly, to me, this still blows me away, I used less watt hours, barely, in dual motor mode. My only justification I can come up with that is that in dual motor mode, it's not fighting the rear motor is not fighting the resistance of the front motor. So overall, it's just as efficient. So if you're really wanting to ride for, you know, for range, you really need to tone down your speed even further versus single or dual motor modes. So because this has a pretty low output charger at 1.75 amps, your recharge time is quite long. Even that little recharge from the 10-mile ride took right at 3 hours. So, I mean, you're looking at well over 12 hours of recharge time. So I'm in cruise control now. It gives you a very small indicator at the top, and it kind of has a interesting way you hear the power apply off and on. Watch out, squirrel. When it's in cruise control. But in dual motor mode, you know, it's not much of a struggle up a small hill like that in cruise control. It just kind of eats the hills up. Of course, you know, with these dual motors, it kind of eats up the battery too. My acceleration test, I'll put a little clip from that. 3, 2, 1. I basically did it as well as I could by keeping the tires from spinning out. And as to be expected, this is the first dual motor scooter I've done my acceleration tests on, and it was by far faster than anything else, any of the single motor scooters. And then the dual motor, and then I did the braking test, and that's where I think the weight came into play. I think it stopped pretty well. I have the electronic braking on a strength of 1 from 1 to 5. I really found higher electronic braking to be sort of a little too much. Hello. So you could play around with the electronic braking for your preference. Just at faster speeds, here I'll kind of illustrate a little bit. So when you're accelerating dual motors and then you hit the electronic brake, it really grabs. Another thing I noticed, kind of the tendency on this scooter is to want to, at least for me, to kind of stand farther back on the deck. And you can hear that suspension kind of clunk in the front. When I go over a bumps, I found if you lean forward, just the center of mass is a little bit to the rear on this scooter. And to really get the benefit from the suspension, you either have to be heavier than me, which is 175 pounds, or leaning forward more. So I just turned the electronic braking up to 3, just so you can feel the difference that I was talking about. I don't know if you could feel that. That's at 3 on the scale of 1 to 5, and I feel like it's way too much. I just don't really, that's not really something I'm really into. When I was braking, the rear tire would lock up and kind of do a little bit of a fishtail. The other thing I was mentioning, hey Milo, can you bring the E2 up? So there's a little bit of a trail to that stem. So if you compare this, of course they're totally different scooters, but the E2's got a more typical. So if you see that angle of the stems, that little bit of angle back, and coupled with all that stuff attached to that front wheel, slows the handling down quite a bit. So here I'm going to go behind Milo here, so you can kind of hopefully hear the motors working a little bit and just get a little different perspective. Go ahead, Milo. So I'm on a kind of a bit, I'm on the E2 S Plus, which is a light end, a little spunky scooter, 36 volts. All right, that's good. But you can see the torque, the burst of torque. It just, it's pretty intense. And so Milo is a little over 6 foot tall, and you can see, one, he hasn't ridden that scooter a lot, so he's a little bit wobbly, and but the other thing is you can see how how low his arms are. I kind of wish the handlebars on the Speedway 5 came up another couple inches. Go ahead and hit the yellow button to see if you are on eco or turbo, and you can tell right away usually. Oh, it was an eco, wasn't it? Yeah. So that burst you earlier with Milo, that was actually in dual motor eco mode. So eco is just changing a little bit of the output. Still pretty insane. Yeah. Yeah, so these buttons are confusing. I was expecting when this is in, so on this one when it's in, it's an eco, but this one's in and it's in dual. So what I've found is I wish there was an indication. You just end up having to hit these buttons and you'll feel it. So I have a feeling that with this scooter, if you maintain like speed limit 2, if you want, this is probably where I would be willing to maximize my range at 15 miles an hour. That's about, I kind of feel like it speeds under this with this particular scooter. It's not as stable, and there's some times where the handling feels a little wobbly, especially as I was mentioning in single motor mode. But there is, like I said, I'm not going to push it, but there is a little bit of a rush that anytime you grab the throttle, that it just is like, boom, it just will put like, hopefully you can feel that. Just it ends up, I've heard some other people comment on my videos, one calling me a wuss, which I really like that actually, but You kind of have to lean forward to get ready to bear the acceleration and torque. So when you're used to it, it's not bad. You just have to be, you can't just be slack armed and hit the throttle, or you're probably not going to be on the scooter anymore. To me, the stem and everything is very stable. There doesn't seem to be any flex or looseness or anything. The ergonomic grips are pretty nice, but they aren't very tight. So you can see I can easily turn them around. It'd be nice if they're locking grips. I might put some double-sided tape on the underside of them. Yeah, I'm going to hop here off the trail just for a second. You know, you could do a little light trail stuff with the Speedway 5. It would handle that fine with the width of the tires. I'm not sure how. You'd have to get really used to the power of the dual motors, so you just didn't end up get yourself in a bad situation on loose terrain. All right, well, I hope this look at the Speedway 5 helps you out. Thank you, Milo, behind the camera there, for helping me film some of this as we're riding. I think if you like this size of the deck, unlike some of the Dualtrons from Mini Motors, the deck is longer and wide. So if you really like the length of this deck, and if you need the hill climbing ability for the dual motors, in some ways the formats of this that are single motor are a little more user friendly to ride. But if you want, also want that thrill of some extra torque, and along with the hill climbing ability, this can be a good option for you. But yeah, it's been fun to ride, so we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
Catch the wave, feel